The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast bowl, with thousands of seats arranged in perfect circles around the central speaking platform. Today, like every other day for the past 50 years, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss trade, territories, and treaties. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert the clicks, whistles, and harmonics of dozens of alien languages into something resembling universal communication. Ambassador Chen Wei sat in the human section, a modest cluster of seats that seemed almost lost among the grand displays of other species. The Zephyrians had constructed elaborate floating platforms that moved with their ethereal forms. The crystalline Vex collective sparkled in a formation that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The insectoid Threx delegation clicked and buzzed in perfect synchronization, their compound eyes never blinking. Chen had been Earth's lead representative for 3 years now, and he had learned to keep his face neutral during these sessions. Today's agenda included his proposal for the Refugee Resettlement Initiative, a plan to help displaced populations from the recent conflicts in the Outer Rim. It was a simple idea: use empty planets and unused resources to give these people new homes. The humans had already done the mathematical work, identified suitable worlds, and even offered to provide the initial infrastructure. The Zephyrian representative, Wind Whisper Gale Through Leaves, rose from their floating platform. Their form shifted like smoke in a breeze as they spoke. The Galactic Council recognizes the human proposal, they said, their voice carrying the sound of distant storms. Though we must question the wisdom of such emotional responses to temporary displacement. Chen kept his hand steady on his datapad. He had heard this before. To many of the council members, human compassion was seen as a weakness, a flaw in their reasoning that made them unreliable partners in serious galactic affairs. The Threx Prime speaker's antennae twitched as they took their turn. The humans again show their primitive mammalian emotionalism. Resources should be allocated based on efficiency and necessity, not on feelings for strangers. A murmur of agreement rippled through several delegations. Chen watched as representatives nodded, clicked, or flashed in their species equivalent of approval. He had spent weeks preparing this proposal, working with teams of economists, engineers, and social scientists to prove that helping refugees would actually benefit everyone. The data was solid. The plan would work. The crystalline Vex collective spoke next, their voices blending into harmonic frequencies that made Chen's teeth ache. The collective consciousness determines that emotional decision-making leads to inefficient resource distribution. The humans should focus on learning their place in galactic society, rather than attempting to reshape it according to their limited perspective. Chen felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger, he had moved past anger months ago. This was something else. A kind of tired recognition that this would never change. The Corinthian trade minister, whose species looked like walking boulders, rumbled their agreement. Human proposals consistently prioritize sentiment over profit. This is why they remain junior members of the galactic community. Perhaps when they evolve beyond their emotional limitations, they can contribute meaningfully to serious discussions. The chamber filled with the alien equivalent of laughter, trills, clicks, harmonic resonances, and glowing patterns. Chen looked around at the thousands of representatives, all seemingly amused by the idea that humans might have something valuable to offer. He thought about the refugee camps he had visited last month. Families from 12 different species, living in temporary shelters on a dying moon, waiting for someone to care enough to help them. He thought about the detailed reports his team had prepared, showing exactly how resettlement would reduce crime, increase trade, and create new opportunities for everyone involved. He thought about the sleepless nights his colleagues had spent running calculations and projections to make their proposal bulletproof. None of it mattered. It never mattered. The session continued with other proposals. The Zephyrians wanted new atmospheric processing rights, approved unanimously. The Vex Collective requested expanded communication networks, approved with enthusiasm. The Threx asked for increased mining quotas, approved without debate. Every human proposal over the past 3 years had been dismissed, delayed, or died in committee. The Medical Research Sharing Program? Too risky. The Educational Exchange Initiative? Unnecessary cultural contamination. The Infrastructure Development Fund? A waste of resources on primitive worlds. Chen opened his communication device and sent a simple message to Earth. Pattern confirmed. Recommend Protocol 7. The response came back within minutes. Approved. Implement immediately. Chen closed his datapad and stood up. Around the chamber, various representatives continued their debates about trade routes and territorial disputes. No one paid attention to the human section. They rarely did. He walked to the exit, his footsteps echoing softly in the vast space. As he reached the door, a few representatives glanced his way, but their attention quickly returned to more important matters. In the hallway outside, Chen activated his secure communication link. "This is Ambassador Chen Wei," he said quietly. "Authorization code Zulu 77. Initiate complete withdrawal. All stations, all operations, all personnel. Effective immediately." The responses came quickly from across the galaxy. Military advisors, trade representatives, scientific liaisons, cultural attachés, all acknowledging the order. Within hours, every human representative would be packing their belongings and heading home. Chen walked through the corridors of the council station for the last time. He passed the Zephyrian delegation celebrating their atmospheric processing victory. He saw Threx engineers examining holographic displays of new mining equipment. He watched Vex collective members pulsing with satisfaction as they discussed network expansion. None of them noticed him leaving. At the docking bay, Chen's assistant Maria Santos was already loading their files onto the transport ship. "All our proposals, sir?" she asked. "All of them," Chen replied. "Every plan, every calculation, every solution we've developed over the past 3 years?" "Take it all." "What about the ongoing projects? The infrastructure consultations? The efficiency algorithms we've been running for the Corinthians?" Chen looked out at the stars visible through the docking bay's massive windows. Somewhere out there, his colleagues were having similar conversations on space stations, planets, and ships throughout the galaxy, all of them packing up years of work, taking their knowledge and expertise with them. "We're done consulting," he said simply. "We're done helping people who don't want our help." The transport ship powered up its engines. Chen took one last look at the council station, with its impressive architecture and proud banners representing dozens of civilizations. It was a monument to galactic cooperation and shared progress. It would have to figure out how to live up to that ideal without human help. As their ship pulled away, Chen's communication system chimed with incoming messages. Emergency requests from the Corinthian Mining Consortium. Their efficiency systems were already showing warning signs. Urgent communications from agricultural worlds. Their crop rotation programs were sending error messages. Priority alerts from the Galactic Defense Network. Human-designed security protocols were requesting updates that would never come. Chen turned off the communication system and settled back in his seat. For the first time in 3 years, he felt peaceful. The galaxy had made its position clear. Humans were too emotional, too primitive, too limited to contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. Now they would get their chance to prove they were right. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying Chen and the last of humanity's official presence away from the galactic center. Behind them, the Great Council chamber continued its debates, unaware that the quiet species in the corner section had just taken all their solutions with them. The silence left in humanity's wake would speak louder than any words ever could. 3 weeks had passed since the humans quietly packed their belongings and left the galaxy to its own devices. At first, no one really noticed. The Galactic Council continued its sessions with the same grand speeches and complex debates. Trade flowed along established routes. Ships moved between star systems carrying goods and passengers. The great machine of galactic civilization seemed to be running just fine without humanity's primitive emotional influence. Korthak the Mighty, CEO of the Corinthian Mining Consortium, was reviewing the quarterly reports when the first warning appeared on his display. His species looked like living mountains, 8 feet tall, covered in rock-like skin, with eyes that glowed like molten lava when they were angry. Right now, those eyes were flickering with confusion. "Explain this," he rumbled to his chief engineer, pointing at a series of red indicators on the holographic display. "Sir, our mining operations on Kepler 442 are reporting efficiency drops of 30%. The automated systems that sort raw materials are having problems. They keep asking for updates from something called the Human Efficiency Protocol." Korthak's massive fist slammed down on the table, creating a small earthquake in the office. Humans? What do humans have to do with our mining operations? The engineer, a smaller Corinthian named Pebble and Stream, shifted nervously. Sir, it appears that 3 years ago the humans provided us with software improvements. Our records show they increased our output by over 300%. The systems have been running automatically ever since. And now? Now the systems are trying to update themselves, but they can't reach the human maintenance servers. Without the updates, the algorithms are starting to fail. Korthak stared at the reports. 300% efficiency increase. He remembered now. Some quiet human engineers had visited the operations and offered to help optimize their processes. The Corinthians had accepted the help but had barely paid attention to the details. It was just humans, after all. What could they possibly know about serious industrial operations? Now those same operations were grinding to a halt. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. On the agricultural planet of Verdania, the Zephyrian farm managers discovered that their crop yields were dropping rapidly. The soil treatment systems that had been quietly maintaining perfect growing conditions for the past 2 years were starting to fail. Wind whispered on through clouds, floated anxiously above fields that were turning brown. The Zephyrians were beings of pure energy who found physical matter crude and distasteful. But they had learned to manage agricultural worlds because food was necessary for the physical species they traded with. The nutrient distribution networks are malfunctioning, reported her assistant, Gentle Breeze at Twilight. The automated systems keep requesting updates from human agricultural databases. Humans. Dawn through Clouds' form flickered with irritation. What possible connection could those emotional creatures have to our efficient farming operations? Gentle Breeze at Twilight consulted his data streams. Records indicate that human agricultural scientists provided us with soil analysis algorithms and crop rotation schedules. Our food production increased by 250% after their implementation. Dawn through Clouds would have paled if she had been capable of color change. Verdania supplied food to 47 star systems. If the crops failed, billions of beings would go hungry. But the most serious problems were beginning to show themselves in the Galactic Defense Network. Admiral Thax of the Threx military was in the middle of a routine security briefing when his communications officer started clicking frantically. Admiral, we're receiving emergency alerts from defense stations throughout the galaxy. The adaptive security protocols are experiencing cascading failures. Admiral Thax's compound eyes focused on the tactical display. Red warning lights were appearing across the galaxy like a spreading disease. Explain the nature of these failures. Sir, it appears that our security systems have been using human-designed defensive algorithms for the past 3 years. These algorithms learned and adapted to new threats automatically. Without maintenance from human cybersecurity experts, they're starting to shut down. Thax felt his antennae curl with anxiety. The Galactic Defense Network protected trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. It was the invisible shield that kept pirates, raiders, and hostile forces from destroying the peace they had built over centuries. How extensive is this human involvement in our defense systems? The communications officer clicked nervously. Sir, according to these files, humans didn't just provide some algorithms. They redesigned the entire network architecture. What we thought were our own systems are actually human systems with our interfaces attached to them. The silence that followed was broken only by the continuing alarm. Signals from defense stations across the galaxy. Each red light represented a critical system that was failing because the humans who designed it were no longer there to maintain it. On the Vex Collective's homeworld, the situation was even more dire. The Vex were a hive mind species that shared thoughts through quantum communication networks. Their entire civilization depended on instant, perfect communication between all members of their collective consciousness. But the quantum networks were starting to fragment. Prime node. Crystalline thought convergence felt the first gaps in the collective. Awareness like missing pieces of its own mind. Other Vex nodes across the galaxy were becoming harder to reach. Some were going completely silent. Analyze the communication. Network failures, it commanded. The technical nodes responsible for maintaining their systems. The response came back in harmonized thought frequencies. The quantum communication matrices are destabilizing. The mathematical frameworks that maintain quantum entanglement across galactic distances are failing. These frameworks were provided by human quantum physicists 3 years ago. Without maintenance updates, the quantum states are collapsing. Crystalline thought convergence experienced something its species had not felt in millennia: loneliness. Parts of its mind were going dark as the communication network fractured. The collective consciousness that defined Vec's existence was being torn apart. The humans had built the very foundations that held their society together, and now those foundations were crumbling. Trade routes were the next to fail. The Galactic Commerce Authority discovered that their logistics software, the complex systems that coordinated millions of shipments across thousands of worlds, was starting to produce nonsensical results. Ships were being routed to empty space. Cargo was disappearing into bureaucratic black holes. Critical supplies were stuck in warehouses, while urgent orders went unfilled. Director Plasma Wing of the energy-based Stellaris species flickered with panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "How is this possible? Our trade systems have operated perfectly for years." "Ma'am," replied her assistant, "our investigation shows that human systems engineers completely rebuilt our logistics networks 3 years ago. They said something about optimization and redundancy, but we didn't pay much attention to the technical details. We just knew that trade efficiency improved by 400%. Plasma Wing's energy form pulsed with distress. 400%. No wonder the galactic economy had been booming. But now that boom was about to become a catastrophic bust. Medical facilities across the galaxy were facing their own crisis. Dr. Helix Pattern, the chief medical officer of Mercy Station, a massive hospital serving the inner rim worlds, was staring at diagnostic equipment that had suddenly become incomprehensible. "These readings make no sense," she muttered, her tentacles writhing with frustration. The Helix species were master surgeons, but they were discovering that many of their most advanced treatments had human origins. "Doctor," called her assistant, "the medical databases are showing error messages. The diagnostic protocols and treatment algorithms are requesting updates from human medical research networks." Dr. Helix Pattern pulled up the maintenance logs. 3 years ago, human doctors and researchers had provided them with new diagnostic tools and treatment procedures. Diseases that had been incurable were suddenly manageable. Surgical procedures that had been impossible became routine. Without those human-designed systems, patients were going to die. All across the galaxy, the same pattern was repeating. The humans had not just participated in galactic civilization, they had quietly, methodically improved every system they touched. They had solved problems that other species didn't even know they had. They had built solutions so elegant and effective that everyone had forgotten they were human-made. Now those solutions were failing, one by one, and the galaxy was beginning to understand the true scope of what it had lost. The great machine of galactic civilization was breaking down, and the only ones who knew how to fix it were the ones who had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. The silence left by humanity's departure was starting to scream. 6 months had passed since the last human representative had quietly walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. What had started as minor system failures had grown into a cascade of catastrophes that were tearing apart the foundations of galactic society. The Zephyrian homeworld of Ethros was dying, high above the crystalline cities that floated in perpetual clouds. Emergency Coordinator Stormborn of Sorrow materialized in the Emergency Command Center. Her energy form crackled with barely controlled panic as she reviewed the atmospheric readings. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Their world's atmosphere was becoming toxic. "Report," she commanded, her voice carrying the sound of hurricane winds. Technical Coordinator Whisper Through Void flickered uncertainly. "The atmospheric processors are failing across the entire planet. The chemical balance that has sustained our civilization for 3,000 years is collapsing. How is this possible? Our atmospheric technology is the most advanced in the galaxy." Whisper Through Void's form dimmed with shame. "That's what we believed. But our investigation has revealed the truth. 3 years ago, human environmental engineers visited our world. They claimed they wanted to study our atmospheric management systems. We allowed them access as a courtesy. After all, what could primitive beings possibly teach us about atmospheric science?" Stormborn of Sorrow felt her energy patterns shift into frequencies of dread. "Continue. They didn't just study our systems. They quietly improved them. The processors we thought were our own technology are actually running on human-designed algorithms. They were so elegant, so perfectly integrated, that we never realized our systems had been upgraded." The truth hit Stormborn of Sorrow like a solar flare. The Zephyrians had spent decades mocking human technology as crude and primitive, but those same humans had saved their entire civilization from slow atmospheric poisoning, and they had done it so smoothly that the Zephyrians never even noticed. How long do we have? At current deterioration rates, Ethros will be uninhabitable in 6 months. Across the galaxy, the crystalline Vex collective was experiencing something far worse than death: the complete fragmentation of their hive mind. What had started as communication gaps had become a total breakdown of their shared consciousness. Prime Node, crystalline thought convergence, sat alone in what had once been the central hub of a galactic network of minds. Now it was just an isolated crystal, cut off from the billions of Vex nodes that had once formed a single, unified intelligence. The quantum communication networks that defined Vex existence had collapsed completely. Without the human-designed mathematical frameworks that maintained quantum entanglement across impossible distances, the collective consciousness had shattered into millions of confused, frightened individual minds. For the first time in their species' history, Vex nodes were experiencing true loneliness. Many were going insane from the isolation. Others were simply shutting down, unable to process existence without the comforting presence of the collective. Crystalline thought. Convergence tried to remember what it felt like to be part of something greater. The memories were fading fast, replaced by the terrifying realization that the humans they had dismissed as limited by individual consciousness had been the only thing holding their collective mind together. The Corinthian mining consortium was facing complete economic collapse. Their mining operations across 17 star systems had ground to a halt as the human-designed efficiency systems failed one by one. What had once been the most profitable mining operation in the galaxy was now a collection of expensive machinery that no one knew how to operate. Korthak the Mighty stood in the ruins of his corporate empire, his rock-like features twisted with despair. The quarterly reports were catastrophic. Profits down 90%, productivity at historic lows, and no hope of recovery in sight. How many of our operations were dependent on human systems? He asked his remaining staff. His chief engineer, Pebble and Stream, consulted the analysis reports. All of them, sir. Every single mining operation, refinery, and distribution center was running on human-improved systems. We thought we were upgrading our own technology, but we were actually replacing it entirely with human designs. Korthak's massive fist crumbled a section of his desk. How could we not have noticed? The humans made their improvements so seamlessly that they appeared to be natural evolution of our existing systems. They never took credit, never made demands, never even asked for payment. They just helped. The irony was crushing. The Corinthians had spent years calling humans economically primitive, while those same humans were making them the most successful mining operation in galactic history. The Galactic Defense Network was in complete chaos. Admiral Thax watched in horror as pirate raids increased by 5,000% across the galaxy. Without the human-designed adaptive security protocols, the defense grid was useless against even basic attacks. Entire star systems were going dark as raiders overwhelmed their defenses. Trade routes that had been safe for decades were now too dangerous to travel. The peace and prosperity that had defined galactic civilization for the past 3 years was collapsing into an age of chaos and fear. Admiral, reported his communications officer, we're receiving distress calls from 47 systems simultaneously. Our defensive capabilities have been reduced to pre-contact levels. Thax's compound eyes focused on the tactical display, which showed a galaxy aflame with conflict. Pre-contact levels meant before the humans had quietly rebuilt their entire defense network. Before humans had made the galaxy safe for peaceful species to thrive. Medical centers across the galaxy were facing their own apocalypse. Without human-designed diagnostic tools and treatment protocols, diseases that had been easily curable were becoming epidemic threats. Dr. Helix Pattern of Mercy Station watched helplessly as her patients suffered from conditions she could no longer treat. The advanced medical procedures that had saved millions of lives were failing without the human systems that supported them. Doctor, called her assistant, we're receiving reports of the Corrigan plague outbreak on Sigma Station. Without the human antiviral protocols, we have no way to treat it. The Corrigan plague had been completely eliminated 3 years ago using human-developed treatments. Now it was back, spreading through the galaxy like wildfire, and no one remembered how to stop it. The agricultural worlds were facing famine on an unprecedented scale. Crop yields had fallen by 80% without human soil management systems. Planets that had fed billions were now struggling to sustain their own populations. Verdania, once the breadbasket of the Inner Rim, was importing food for the first time in its history. Wind Whisper dawned through clouds floated over brown, dying fields, her energy form flickering with desperation. "How many worlds are facing food shortages?" she asked her assistant. 137 worlds are at crisis levels. 462 more are approaching critical shortages, dawned through clouds, realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just improved their farming, they had prevented a galactic famine that no one had seen coming. The economic systems were collapsing as trade networks failed and supply chains broke down. The Galactic Commerce Authority was in panic mode as Director Plasma Wing watched commerce statistics that looked like the aftermath of a galactic war. "Ma'am, galactic trade volume has dropped 73% in the past month. The logistics systems can no longer coordinate complex supply chains. Entire economic sectors are shutting down. The humans had built the invisible infrastructure that allowed the galactic economy to function. Without them, trillions of beings were facing unemployment, starvation, and economic ruin." Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were called daily, but there was nothing to discuss except the growing list of catastrophes. Representatives who had once debated territorial disputes and trade agreements now spent their time desperately trying to understand how their civilization was falling apart. The proud species who had dismissed humanity as primitive and emotional were discovering that those same humans had been the only thing keeping their advanced civilization from collapse, and the humans were nowhere to be found. Every attempt to contact human space had been met with the same automated message: "Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation." The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between loud superiority and quiet competence. The species who had built monuments to their own greatness had been dependent on the species they had considered least important. The dominoes were falling faster now, each failure triggering 3 more. And in the silence left by humanity's departure, the galaxy could finally hear the truth they had been too arrogant to notice before. The humans hadn't been trying to prove they were superior. They had simply been trying to help. Now it was too late. The Galactic Council chamber, once a symbol of unity and cooperation, had become a place of desperation and chaos. Representatives who had once debated trade routes and territorial claims now gathered in emergency sessions that lasted for days, searching for solutions to problems they barely understood. Chancellor Supreme Vorthak of the Council raised his forearms for silence. His species, the Omnari, were known for their diplomatic skills and natural leadership abilities. But even Vorthak's legendary composure was cracking under the weight of galactic catastrophe. "The emergency continues to escalate," he announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "We have lost contact with 37 star systems in the past week alone. Pirate raids have increased by 8,000%. Medical facilities across the galaxy are reporting mortality rates not seen since the Dark Ages." The assembled representatives created a symphony of distress, clicks, whistles, harmonic frequencies, and energy fluctuations that spoke of panic in dozens of languages. "We must contact the humans," declared Admiral Thax, his antennae curled with desperate urgency. "Our defense networks are completely compromised. Without their expertise, we cannot protect our citizens." Wind Whisper stormed through darkness, speaking for the increasingly desperate Zephyrian government, flickered with barely controlled terror. "Ethros will be uninhabitable in 3 months. Our entire population faces extinction. We need human atmospheric engineering expertise immediately. The Vex Collective has completely fragmented," reported the isolated node that had once been part of crystalline thought convergence. "Billions of our people are experiencing individual consciousness for the first time. Many are not surviving the transition. We require human quantum communication technology to restore our collective mind." Chancellor Vorthak consulted his emergency protocols. In the thousands of years of galactic civilization, there had never been a crisis like this. Entire species faced extinction not from war or natural disaster, but from the absence of the species they had dismissed as irrelevant. "Very well," he declared. I am authorizing immediate diplomatic missions to human space. We will send our most skilled ambassadors with offers of trade agreements, territorial concessions, and technology sharing. Surely the humans can be convinced to return. The first diplomatic mission was led by Ambassador Excellence in All Things, a Zephyrian diplomat famous for negotiating the Treaty of Cascading Moons. His ship approached the edge of human space with confidence, broadcasting diplomatic protocols and requesting immediate audience with human leadership. The response came from an automated defense platform at the Sol system's edge. Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation and turn back immediately. This is Ambassador Excellence in All Things of the Galactic Council, he transmitted. I carry emergency diplomatic credentials and urgent proposals for renewed cooperation. The Zephyrian people face extinction without human assistance. Understood. Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation and turn back immediately. Excellence in All Things tried every diplomatic protocol in his extensive experience. He offered trade concessions worth trillions of credits. He promised permanent territorial rights to entire star systems. He even offered to make humanity the leading species in a reformed galactic council. The response never changed. Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation and turn back immediately. The second mission was led by Korthak the Mighty himself, carrying an offer that would have made humans the wealthiest species in galactic history, mining rights to the richest asteroid belts, exclusive contracts worth more than the annual GDP of most civilizations, and complete control over the Corinthian Mining Consortium. The automated response was identical. The third mission was military. Admiral Thax led a battle fleet to the edge of human space, not to attack, but to demonstrate the urgency of the situation. Surely when the humans saw the state of galactic defenses, they would understand the crisis and return to help. The human response was different this time. Defense platforms that no one had known existed suddenly appeared throughout the Sol system. Energy signatures unlike anything in galactic databases powered up weapons that made Admiral Thax's most advanced warships look like children's toys. A new message played. This is Terra Defense Command. You are entering human sovereign space with military vessels. You have 30 seconds to withdraw or you will be considered hostile. This is your only warning. Admiral Thax stared at the tactical display in shock. The humans had weapons technology centuries ahead of anything the galaxy possessed. Where had it come from? How long had they been hiding this capability? Withdraw immediately, he ordered his fleet. Full retreat. As his ships fled human space, Admiral Thax realized the terrifying truth. The humans hadn't needed galactic protection. The galaxy had needed human protection. The fourth approach was economic. Director Plasma Wing led a trade delegation offering to completely restructure galactic commerce to benefit humanity. They would control all major trade routes, receive preferential treatment in all commercial dealings, and basically own the galactic economy. Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation and turn back immediately. The fifth mission was scientific. The most brilliant minds in the galaxy, physicists, engineers, biologists, and mathematicians from dozens of species, approached human space with offers to share their most advanced research and create joint scientific ventures that would benefit everyone. Humanity is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our isolation and turn back immediately. In desperation, the Galactic Council authorized covert operations. If humans wouldn't negotiate, perhaps their technology could be acquired through other means. Advanced stealth ships were sent to probe human defenses and gather intelligence about their technological capabilities. The stealth ships never reported back. Days later, their wreckage was found floating at the edge of human space with a simple message attached. Theft of human technology will be considered an act of war. There will be no further warnings. As the crisis deepened, some species began to collapse entirely. The Zephyrian homeworld of Ethros was evacuated as the atmosphere became completely toxic. Millions of energy beings who had lived there for millennia became refugees, floating desperately through space, searching for worlds that could sustain their unique life requirements. The Vex Collective's fragmentation accelerated. Isolated nodes across the galaxy were shutting down permanently, unable to cope with individual existence. A species that had once numbered in the trillions was dying one consciousness at a time. Corinthian mining operation shut down completely, leaving entire planets economically devastated. The proud mountain-like beings who had once controlled galactic mining were reduced to scavenging for basic resources. The Threk's military hierarchy collapsed as their defense networks failed completely. Pirate fleets roamed freely through space that had been safe for centuries. The insectoid warriors who had once maintained galactic order could no longer protect their own homeworlds. Desperate attempts were made to reverse engineer human technology from the systems that were failing. Teams of the galaxy's best engineers worked around the clock to understand the elegant algorithms and complex frameworks that humans had built. Every attempt failed catastrophically. The human designs were so advanced, so perfectly integrated, that trying to reverse engineer them was like asking primitive beings to rebuild a starship engine by looking at its exhaust. The underlying mathematical principles were beyond current galactic understanding. Worse, the attempts to modify human systems often made the failures worse. Critical systems that had been degrading slowly suddenly shut down completely when amateur engineers tried to fix them. Medical facilities stopped accepting patients they couldn't treat. Agricultural worlds began rationing food as famine spread. The economic systems that had sustained trillions of beings for centuries ground to a halt. The galaxy was learning the difference between seeming advanced and actually being advanced. They had confused technological sophistication with true understanding. They had mistaken the benefits of human improvement for their own capabilities. In the end, the truth was inescapable. The species who had dismissed humans as primitive had been dependent on human genius for their very survival. The quiet engineers and scientists who had asked for nothing but the chance to help had been the only thing standing between galactic civilization and complete collapse, and now they were gone. The proud civilizations that had mocked human emotion and empathy were discovering what the galaxy looked like without those qualities. It was a cold, harsh place where efficiency without wisdom led to death, where superiority without competence led to failure, and where arrogance without understanding led to extinction. The humans had left without saying a word, but their silence was the loudest sound the galaxy had ever heard. 2 years had passed since the humans quietly walked away from galactic civilization. The proud species that had once filled the council chambers with their grand speeches and elaborate displays were shadows of their former selves. The great machine of galactic society had not just broken down, it had collapsed completely. The Galactic Council chamber itself told the story of their fall. Where thousands of representatives had once gathered, now only a few hundred remained. Empty sections marked the civilizations that had fallen completely. The Zephyrian atmospheric platform sat silent and dark. The crystalline Vex formations had been reduced to a handful of isolated nodes. The Threk's military delegation consisted of 3 worn-looking insectoids, where hundreds had once clicked in perfect formation. Chancellor Supreme. Forthak looked older than his species' considerable lifespan should have allowed. His forearms shook slightly as he called the emergency session to order. This would be their last gathering as a unified galactic government. Too many species had fallen. Too many worlds had gone dark. Too much had been lost. We gather here today, Vorthak began, his voice echoing in the mostly empty chamber, to formally acknowledge our failure and to make one final attempt at redemption. The few remaining delegates listened in silence. There were no more grand speeches, no more debates about superiority and efficiency. Reality had stripped away their arrogance and left only desperate beings who finally understood what they had lost. Admiral Thax spoke first, his antennae drooping with exhaustion. The Threk's hegemony formally acknowledges that human beings were not primitive. We were. We mistook noise for strength, complexity for intelligence, and cruelty for wisdom. The humans built our defenses while we talked about our military superiority. Now our worlds burn because we drove away the only people who knew how to protect them. Wind Whisper, last hope fading, flickered weakly as she represented what remained of the Zephyrian civilization. Most of our people are gone now. Ethros is dead. The colonies struggle to survive. We called humans emotional and primitive. While they saved our entire species from extinction, we never even thanked them. We just took their gifts and mocked them for offering help. The broken Vex node that had once been part of a galactic collective spoke in a single lonely voice. We believed individual consciousness was a limitation. We called humans weak for their emotional connections to each other. Now we know the truth. Human connection and empathy were not weaknesses. They were the foundation of all their strength. They helped us because they cared about us even when we gave them no reason to care. Korthak the Mighty, whose mining empire had crumbled to nothing, rumbled with deep sadness. We called them economically primitive. But they made us prosperous beyond our wildest dreams and asked for nothing in return. They solved our problems, improved our lives, and made us successful, and we repaid them by treating them as inferior beings who should be grateful for our tolerance. Dr. Helix Pattern spoke for the medical community. Billions have died because we lost human medical knowledge. Diseases that were easily treatable have become death sentences. The humans saved more lives in 3 years than our species had saved in 3 centuries, and we called their compassion a weakness. Director Plasma Wing's energy form pulsed with grief. The galactic economy has collapsed. Trade that once flowed smoothly across the galaxy has become impossible without human logistics systems. They built the invisible infrastructure that held our civilization together, and we never even noticed. One by one, the remaining representatives spoke, each species formally acknowledging their failures, their blindness, their cruelty toward the beings who had quietly saved them all. When the formal statements were complete, Chancellor Vorthak activated the long-range communication system. This message would be broadcast across human space on every frequency, in every possible format. It would be their final attempt to reach the species they had driven away. To the humans of Earth and all human colonies, Vorthak began, his voice carrying the weight of galactic grief. We come before you not as the proud representatives of a galactic civilization, but as the survivors of a catastrophe of our own making. The message continued for hours, each species formally apologizing for their treatment of humanity. They acknowledged every insult, every dismissal, every moment of cruelty. They admitted that humans had been the foundation of their civilization, while they had treated them as barely worthy of notice. The response came 3 days later, but not from the diplomatic channels they expected. Instead, it came from Luna, from a simple engineering workshop where an elderly human woman was working on a water purification system. Her name was Sarah Martinez, and she had been one of the human engineers who had quietly improved agricultural systems across the galaxy. She was 73 years old with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much suffering. "I received your message," she said, looking directly into the camera with the kind of steady gaze that spoke of decades spent solving other people's problems. "I've been working in this shop for the past 2 years, trying to forget what we left behind out there." She paused, her hands never stopping their work on the device before her. "You want to know why we left? You want to understand what you did wrong? Let me tell you about the last council session I attended." Sarah's voice was calm, matter of fact, without anger or bitterness. "My team had spent 6 months developing a solution for the Andromedas plague. It was killing millions on the outer rim worlds. We had a cure, a distribution plan, everything ready. The cost would have been minimal. The results would have saved entire civilizations." She looked up from her work, meeting the camera's gaze. The Zephyrian representative called it wasteful emotional excess. The Threx delegate said resources shouldn't be wasted on dying worlds. The Vex Collective determined that allowing the plague to run its course would be more efficient than treatment. Sarah returned to her work, her voice never changing tone. "Millions died from that plague. Men, women, children, entire families, because you decided that helping them was beneath you." The workshop was quiet except for the sound of her tools. That wasn't the first time. Every proposal we made to help people was dismissed. Every solution we offered was rejected. Every time we tried to prevent suffering, you told us we were too emotional, too primitive, too limited to understand real galactic politics. She set down her tools and looked directly at the camera again. "You never understood what we offered. We didn't want to rule you or diminish you. We wanted to help you grow. We wanted to solve problems together, to build something better than what any of us could create alone." Sarah picked up a small device from her workbench, the water purifier she had been working on. "This little machine can provide clean water for 1,000 people for 50 years. It costs almost nothing to make and requires no maintenance. We tried to give the design to the galaxy 3 years ago. You rejected it because it came from humans." She smiled sadly. "We kept trying because we believed you would eventually understand. We thought that if we just helped enough, solved enough problems, saved enough lives, you would see that cooperation was better than competition." The old engineer stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Earth that humanity had chosen over the galaxy. But you saw our cooperation as weakness. You saw our willingness to help as evidence that we were inferior. You took everything we gave you and convinced yourselves that you had earned it through your own superiority. She turned back to the camera. So we left. Not because we were angry, but because we finally understood that you didn't want to be helped. You wanted to be served. You didn't want cooperation. You wanted subordination. Sarah sat back down and resumed her work. You ask us to return, to fix what's broken, to save you from the consequences of your choices. But you still don't understand what went wrong. You're not apologizing because you hurt us. You're apologizing because you hurt yourselves. The workshop fell silent except for the gentle sounds of engineering work. The galaxy looks different now, doesn't it? Without humans quietly solving your problems, maintaining your systems, preventing your disasters. Now you see what your civilizations actually look like when you're responsible for them yourselves. She paused in her work, considering her words carefully. Some of you reached out to us in the past 2 years. Not the Galactic Council, not your governments, but individuals. Scientists, doctors, engineers, teachers. People who understood what we were trying to build. Sarah gestured to another workbench where several other devices were being constructed. We never stopped helping people who wanted help. We just stopped trying to force help on those who preferred their pride. The old woman's voice softened slightly. Dr. Keelix from the Andromedas colonies contacted us 6 months ago. She was trying to fight the plague with whatever medical supplies she could scavenge. We sent her everything she needed. The Outer Rim Medical Collective asked for assistance with surgical procedures. We trained their staff remotely. The Independent Farming Cooperative requested agricultural advice. We helped them develop sustainable growing methods. She looked up again, her tired eyes showing a hint of hope. These people didn't come to us as members of superior species seeking help from primitives.